I still haven't gotten a good shofar in my home, but that's what I have. I tried a different one. It does not sound that inspiring, but it gets us started today on Friday, September 9th, Erev Shabbat, Parshat Ki Tetze. Ki Tetze lemilchama al oivecha. The Torah discusses here what happens when you go out to war. And the topic, interestingly, does not revolve around the usual components of warfare conversation in the Torah about even last week's Torah portion around, the topic of our topic we discussed about how you have a holy camp and the like. But rather, the very specific reality of the desires of a soldier for a woman that he sees in the enemy camp, and what one does with those desires. The Torah says the following: if God gives an enemy into your hand, and you take a captive, and in the group of captives that are taken, you see Eshet Yifat Toar, a woman who was very, very beautiful. And if you have a strong desire for her, and you want to take her for yourself as a wife, okay, so the Torah discusses what you need to do. We'll come back to that in a moment. It's a very strange discussion, but so it is. You go out to war, and you're taken by a woman who you've taken as a captive, and the Torah walks you through how you could marry her. There is a discussion about what war we're talking about, and in the specific Rashi we have, of course, we're talking about Milchemet Harishut, not a Milchemet Mitzvah. These are the volitional wars that the country might wage, the nation might wage for expanding territory and the like. Okay, but you'll find another reference point which doesn't talk about that distinction between obligatory and volitional war, but rather b'milchemet ha-yetzer hakatuv medaber. We should read this all, according to some, not only in the specific context of actual warfare and an actual woman, but rather the war that you wage against your desires. Wow, that's a very different war, is it not? The Torah describes here what you do. You bring her to your home. You will cut off all her hair. You will shorten all her nails, and you will remove the cloak of the captive from her, which might be alluring. And she'll not sit there. She'll just sit in very simple clothing. And she'll sit there in your home. According to the sages, she'll have to sit there right in front of you as you walk in the door every day. And she'll be crying for her father and her mother for a whole month. And only after that may you cohabit with her and be for you as a wife. And it will be, and if you really in the end don't want her anymore, which seems to be the gamble the Torah is willing to take regarding you, then you must set her free. You may not sell her as if she were a slave girl. You may not enslave her because you have already put her through this torment. Wow, it's a lot going on there. And the Torah's ruling here is in some ways a very aware ruling about the nature of the Yetzer, indeed, of one's desires. And namely, as some will read it, it sits just here that if the Torah would have flat out forbidden you to do this, you would simply have ignored the Torah. And so the Torah makes, Torah makes a gamble and says, let's say, okay, no, you want her as your wife, just bring her in, and we're going to have her there, and she's going to be weeping and crying the whole time long, and at some point you're going to stop wanting her because she's going to be, you'll see how much anguish, and you'll say, what do I need this for, what do I create this for, and you'll walk away. So that's how we usually read this text. There is a variation on this in one of the most important books that I have for Rosh Hashanah. This book, this is This is real, and you are completely unprepared by Rabbi Alan Lew of blessed memory, who had his own journeys in life before becoming a rabbi, and deeply drawn into the Eastern meditative practices as well. And in this case, what it means to be mindful, the mindfulness work that a person can do, and he believes, and it's such a good Torah. Listen to what he says. The passage from Parshat Tetze points us to an answer we're picking up in the middle here. First of all, what do we do? Because you come into the house every day. First of all, we watch our desire arise. That's the beginning of this. The soldier at the beginning of the Parshat Tetze has to live with his desire, to watch it as it evolves without acting on it for a full month. It's not merely that you see her there crying, you say, enough already, I got to let it go. Is the Torah's forcing you to see what's happening, just to see it. Watch it as it evolves. The second thing we can learn from him is that once we have our desires firmly in view, we can then strip them of their exotic dress. We can make them cut off their fingernails and their hair. We can make them take off that revealing frock they were wearing when we first saw them. In other words, we can see them for what they really are, not the woman, but our Yetzer, the desires that are strong within us. Why do we run after ambition, he asks. Why do we need fame and fortune? Why do we need to have a sexual conquest? If we try to push these this is now the key Torah, if we try to push these desires down, they'll only come up somewhere else. It's not that if the Torah tries to tell you no, that you're just going to bolt against the Torah. It's about the nature of the human need. And if we just try to suppress human need, they'll just emerge somewhere else. If we kill them off altogether, we may be doing violence to ourselves. We may be killing off the basis of our real creativity. The sages have this to say about the Yetzer Hara. You need the Yetzer. You need the desire. That's important. Better to simply strip these desires of their romance and then watch them for a month before acting on them, before taking them to yourself. That is what he claims is part of the experience of this month of Elul. It is to be conscious. It is to be aware. It is to watch ourselves, not to try to do violence to ourselves. Violence meaning aggressively try to, turn ourselves around. That's not how human beings work. We pay attention, and we're aware, and then realize that some of those things which seem to be so strong within us, when we look at them, we say, no, myself is a lot stronger than I believe myself to be, and this thing doesn't need to own me or to control me. It doesn't have the allure it once had. I love this teaching, and I hope it has an impact for you as well. As we move into the second half of the month of Elul, after the Shabbat, it'll be just a little more than 2 weeks to Rosh Hashanah. Let it sit with you and try to practice it as well. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.